Files.
Grandfather Paradox. Imagine you have a time machine. One day, you get curious and decide to go back in time to when your grandfather was a young man, before he had any kids, including your mother or father. Now, here's the wild part. Let's say, for some reason, you stop him from ever meeting your grandmother. That means they never fall in love, never have your mother or father, and that means you are never born. But wait, if you were never born, how could you have gone back in time to stop your grandfather? And if you didn't go back, then he does meet your grandmother, has your mother or father, and you are born. So you could go back in time and stop him again. This is the grandfather paradox, a super confusing loop where changing the past could make it impossible for you to exist, which means you couldn't have changed the past in the first place. It's like a time travel tug of war, where the past and future keep messing each other up. The Bootstrap Paradox, also called a causal loop, is like a magical mystery that asks, where did this thing even come from? Here's a fun example. Imagine you love music, and one day you travel back in time with your favorite song. While in the past, you meet a young musician who's struggling to write music. You play your favorite song for them, and they love it. They write it down, record it, and become super famous for creating that song. Fast forward to the future. You grow up listening to that very same song, get inspired, and one day go back in time with it again. But who actually wrote the song? You learned it from the musician in the past, but they learned it from you. The song is stuck in a loop with no clear beginning. It came from nowhere. That's the Bootstrap Paradox, something that exists without ever being created, just passed around in a circle through time. The Predestination Paradox is like being stuck in a story where you can't change what's meant to happen, even if you try. Let's say you go back in time because you want to stop a big fire from happening in a bakery. You do everything you can, warn the baker, splash water around, even unplug the oven. But no matter what you do, the fire still happens. And here's the twist. Something you did actually caused the fire. Maybe the bucket of water you knocked over short-circuited the oven. You went back to stop the fire, but by doing that, you made it happen. So the Predestination Paradox says, some events are locked in, and your time-traveling actions just help make them happen, even if you're trying to avoid them. It's like the universe saying, nice try, buddy. But this was always your destiny. Temporal Paradox. All right, let's unwrap this time travel puzzle together. A temporal paradox is like the big umbrella for all the weird, twisty problems that can happen when you mess with time. Temporal just means time. So a temporal paradox is any kind of situation where time starts acting strange or doesn't make sense anymore because something went out of order. Here's a fun way to think about it. Imagine you have a magic coloring book. You color in a page, then travel back in time and see the book already colored, just the way you did it. But who colored it first? You in the future or the book in the past? Confusing? That's a temporal paradox. It includes things like Bootstrap Paradox. Something exists with no clear origin. Grandfather Paradox. You stop yourself from being born. Predestination Paradox. You try to change something, but your actions cause it to happen. Basically, if time travel creates a brain tangling, but how? Moment. That's a temporal paradox. Hitler Paradox. Okay, this one's a bit darker, but we can explain it simply and carefully. The Hitler Paradox is a special version of the Grandfather Paradox. It's based on a what-if question that people ask about time travel. What if you went back in time and stopped someone really bad, like Adolf Hitler, before he did terrible things. At first, it sounds like a good idea. But here's the twist. If you succeed in stopping him before World War II ever happens, then there's no reason for anyone to go back in time to stop him in the first place. Because the bad stuff never happened. But if no one goes back to stop him, then the bad stuff does happen. So someone does go back. And round it goes. This makes a paradox, because your action cancels out the very reason you went back. So the Hitler paradox is like a moral version of the grandfather paradox. If you change the past to stop something awful, you might also erase the reason for going back in the first place, and that messes up the timeline. Polchinski's paradox is a fun and twisty one that even involves a billiard ball. Imagine you have a time machine that's shaped like a tunnel. You roll a billiard ball into this tunnel, and boom, it travels back in time just a little bit. But here's the tricky part. What if that billiard ball pops out of the tunnel in the past and hits itself just before it enters the tunnel, hard enough to stop itself from going in? If the ball never goes in, then it never travels back to hit itself. But if it doesn't hit itself, then it does go in the tunnel. But then, it hits itself, but then it doesn't go in. And round we go. That's Polchinski's paradox, a time travel situation where something tries to stop itself from happening, creating a confusing loop. The information paradox is a real puzzler from space, and it stars the most mysterious things out there. Black holes. Let's imagine a cosmic library filled with books. Each book is like a piece of information about stuff in the universe, like atoms, energy, and even pizza recipes. Now, if you toss a book into a black hole, it disappears. Gone forever, right? But here's the problem. In science, we believe that information can't be destroyed. It can change form, but it always has to go somewhere. So, when the black hole eventually disappears, which Stephen Hawking said it slowly does, by something called Hawking radiation, what happens to the book's info? If it's gone forever, that breaks the rules of physics. If it comes back somehow, then how does the black hole remember what you threw in? That's the information paradox. Black holes seem to erase information, but physics says that's impossible. So scientists are in a tug-of-war between what black holes do and what the universe is supposed to allow. It's like the universe is hiding its homework, and we're trying to find out where it went. Ontological Paradox. This one's all about something that exists without ever being created, like a magic object or idea that just appears out of nowhere and loops forever. Here's a simple story. Let's say you have a shiny, super cool pocket watch. One day, you travel back in time and meet a younger version of your grandparent. You decide to give them the watch as a gift. Years go by, and that grandparent gives it to your parent, who gives it to you. And one day, you go back in time again and give it to your grandparent. But wait, who actually made the watch? Nobody. It's stuck in a time loop with no origin. It just keeps getting passed from future to past and back again. That's the ontological paradox. Ontological is just a fancy word about the nature of being or existence. And this paradox asks, how can something exist without ever being made? It's like a self-creating loop where the cause and effect keep feeding each other forever. Shakespeare Paradox. The term Shakespeare Paradox isn't widely recognized as a specific paradox in literature or philosophy. However, it can be associated with a couple of fascinating ideas related to Shakespeare. The first one, the infinite monkey theorem. Imagine a monkey randomly pressing keys on a typewriter for an infinite amount of time. The infinite monkey theorem suggests that, given endless time, this monkey would almost surely type out the complete works of Shakespeare. This presents a paradox about randomness and order. How can something as complex and meaningful as Shakespeare's plays emerge from sheer randomness? It's a playful way to explore the concepts of probability and infinity. The second idea is the paradoxes within Shakespeare's works. Shakespeare himself was a master of paradoxes, statements that seem self-contradictory, yet reveal a deeper truth. For example, in Sonnet 147, he writes about the paradox of being drawn to something harmful, comparing his love to a disease that he continues to feed, despite knowing it's detrimental. This reflects the human experience of desiring things that may not be good for us. Additionally, scholars have explored how Shakespeare's plays delve into paradoxical themes, especially in his tragicomedies, like Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. These plays navigate complex human experiences filled with contradictions that coexist, prompting audiences to reflect on the multifaceted nature of life. In essence, while Shakespeare Paradox isn't a formal term, it can refer to the intriguing interplay between randomness and creation, as illustrated by the infinite monkey theorem, or to the profound paradoxes woven throughout Shakespeare's own writings that continue to captivate and challenge readers and audiences alike. Twin Paradox. Okay, imagine you have a pair of twins named Stella and Bella. They're the same age, and they decide to try a fun space adventure. Stella stays on Earth, while Bella zooms off in a super-fast spaceship that can go close to the speed of light. Now, here's where things get a little strange, like a time travel movie. Because Bella's spaceship is going so fast, time moves slower for her compared to Stella, who is chilling on Earth. It's like Bella has a magical remote that makes time tick slower for her. When Bella finally returns from her space trip, she steps off her spaceship and sees Stella. But guess what? Stella is much older now, while Bella has barely aged. Even though they were born at the same time, Bella is younger because time moved differently for her. This weird time trick is called the twin paradox, and it happens because of something called time dilation, which is a fancy way of saying time stretches and squishes when you go super fast. It's one of the crazy real-life effects of Einstein's theory of relativity. Butterfly effect paradox. This one flutters in from chaos theory and time travel stories, and it's a real imagination stretcher. Let's flap into it. The butterfly effect says that tiny changes can lead to huge differences later on. Like, a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and weeks later, boom, a tornado happens in Texas. Now add time travel, and things get really wild. Let's say you go back in time and accidentally step on a butterfly. Just a little squish, right? But that small change sets off a whole chain reaction. A lizard doesn't get eaten. That lizard eats a bird's egg. That bird was supposed to distract someone important. That person ends up never inventing pizza. So when you return to your time, everything's different. No pizza. This is where the butterfly effect paradox kicks in. How can such a tiny action completely scramble the entire future? It's a paradox because it makes us wonder, can we ever truly control or predict what happens when we change the past, even just a little? Quantum Immortality Paradox. The Quantum Immortality Paradox is a deep, spooky thought experiment that mixes science with some seriously mind-bending ideas. Imagine a scientist with a special machine based on quantum mechanics, the science of the super tiny, like atoms and particles. In this world, things can be in many states at once until someone looks at them. This is called quantum superposition. Now, this scientist builds a machine that does something dangerous, like it could go boom, based on a random quantum event. But here's the twist. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, every possible outcome happens. But in a different universe. So if the machine goes boom in one universe, it doesn't in another. And the scientist only ever experiences the universe where they survive. Every time they try the machine, they always live from their own point of view. So the quantum immortality paradox asks, could someone become immortal in their own timeline, constantly surviving by jumping to the universe where they don't die? But here's the catch. Just because they always live doesn't mean others in other universes don't see them die. So it creates a creepy, untestable idea that's more of a mind experiment than a real one. It's not something scientists actually do. It's more like a sci-fi what-if that explores how strange quantum reality might be. Causality Violation Paradox. The causality violation paradox happens when cause and effect get all scrambled up, like pressing a light switch after the light has already turned on. In our normal world, things happen in order. You throw a ball, it flies through the air, and it hits the wall. That's called causality. The cause, you throw the ball, happens before the effect. It hits the wall. Time marches forward like a well-behaved parade. But in a causality violation, that order gets flipped or tangled. The ball hits the wall, and then you throw it. This kind of paradox often shows up in time travel stories, where someone might do something in the past that affects the future, which then changes the past. And suddenly, nobody knows what came first. Example, you go back in time and give your past self the blueprint for a time machine. Your past self builds it, and one day gives you the blueprint to go back, and you give it to your past self. But where did the blueprint originally come from? That's a causality violation paradox, when the line between cause and effect becomes a tangled time spaghetti. Bilker's Paradox. This one's a real thinker from the world of time travel and logic. Imagine you get a message from the future. It says, you're going to eat spaghetti for dinner tomorrow. Now you think, oh really? I'll prove you wrong. So you eat pizza instead. Boom. This creates a problem. If you can freely choose to ignore the message, then the message from the future was wrong. But if it was wrong, how could it come from a future that never happened? This is the heart of the Bilker's paradox. If you get information from the future, but you can choose to act differently just to prove it wrong, then how could that information have come from the actual future? So it's a paradox because if the future is fixed and knowable, you shouldn't be able to change it. But if you can change it, then how can the future be known? It's like the universe sends you a spoiler, and you say, nah, I'll rewrite the script. This makes scientists and philosophers wonder, can the future really be predicted? Or does free will make it unpredictable? Meeting yourself paradox. Now, let's say you decide to go back in time to meet yourself from yesterday. But here's where things get tricky. It's called a paradox. A paradox is like a puzzle that doesn't quite make sense. And the meeting yourself paradox is one of the wildest ones out there. Here's the problem. If you go back in time and meet yourself, what happens next? Imagine you tell your past self, hey, don't use the time machine. Now your past self won't time travel, which means you never went back in time to give that advice. But if you didn't go back, how did you meet your past self in the first place? See what I mean? It's like a circle that goes round and round without a clear answer. That's what makes it a paradox. It totally breaks the rules of how time is supposed to work. Some people think that time travel might create alternate timelines, while others believe the universe would somehow prevent paradoxes from happening. And then, there's the wild idea that time travel could just rip apart reality altogether. Yikes! The Fermi Paradox is a question about why we don't see any aliens, even though the universe is so big that it seems like there should be plenty of them. A similar question can be asked about time travel. If people in the future ever invent time machines, why don't we see any time travelers today? If time travel were possible, it seems like visitors from the future would show up in our time. Maybe they'd come to see important moments in history, or just explore what life was like in the past. But since we don't see any clear evidence of time travelers, it makes people wonder why. Here are some ideas scientists and thinkers have come up with. Time travel rules. There could be strict rules about not interfering with the past, like a time traveler's version of leave no trace. One-way travel. Some theories suggest that time machines might only work going forward, not backward. In that case, no one from the future could visit us. No time machines yet. Time travel may only be possible from the moment the machine is created onward, meaning we wouldn't see travelers until that point. Invisible travelers. Maybe time travelers are here, but they hide themselves or blend in to avoid being noticed. It's a puzzling question, and just like the search for aliens, it makes people curious about the mysteries of the universe. The multiple timelines paradox is an idea that comes up when people think about what happens if you change the past. Let's say someone travels back in time and changes something, like stopping a big event from happening. This creates a tricky question. What happens to the future that they came from? One way to solve this is by thinking about multiple timelines. Instead of one single timeline, the moment they change something, a brand new timeline branches off. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book. Every choice creates a new path. The original timeline still exists, but the time traveler is now in a different one, like stepping onto a new road, while the old road continues without them. This idea helps avoid problems like the grandfather paradox, where a traveler goes back in time and accidentally prevents their own grandparents from meeting. If multiple timelines exist, the traveler would create a timeline where they were never born, but their original timeline, where they were born and traveled back in time, would remain unchanged. It's like having parallel worlds, each with its own version of events. This makes time travel sound a bit less dangerous, because messing with the past wouldn't erase the time traveler's original reality. The observer effect paradox is a puzzling idea that comes from both physics and time travel. It's all about how simply watching something can change what happens. In science, especially in tiny particles like electrons, things act strangely when we try to observe them. Just by looking at them, we might accidentally change how they behave. It's like trying to watch a shy cat. The cat might act totally different just because it knows you're watching. Now, if we think about this with time travel, it gets even trickier. Imagine someone travels to the past to observe a historical event without touching or changing anything. But the mere act of being there could affect how things play out. Maybe people notice something strange, animals act differently, or even the tiniest shift in air or light changes what happens. Even without meaning to, the time traveler's presence might change history, and that creates a paradox. This connects with another idea called the butterfly effect, where even a small change, like a butterfly flapping its wings, could lead to huge consequences over time. In this case, just observing the past might ripple through time, changing the future in unexpected ways. The temporal weapons paradox is a mind-bending idea that comes from thinking about time travel and using it for battles or war. It's like asking, what if someone used time travel as a weapon? Imagine a war where one side has a time machine. Instead of fighting in the present, they could go back in time and stop their enemy from ever becoming powerful. They might sabotage factories before they're built, change key events, or even prevent their enemies' leaders from being born. But then comes the paradox. If they succeeded, their enemy would never become a threat, which means there'd be no reason to travel back and stop them in the first place. This creates a confusing loop. Win the war. No enemy exists. No need to time travel. War happens again. It's like trying to delete a problem that no longer exists, which makes time itself go in circles. To prevent this kind of paradox, some people suggest that time might protect itself. Maybe history would heal around changes, fixing itself to avoid contradictions. Others think this could lead to multiple timelines, where every time a weapon is used through time travel, a new alternate timeline branches off. In that case, both versions, one with the war and one without, could exist at the same time. The temporal illness paradox is a concept that comes up in time travel scenarios where someone develops an illness or medical condition that becomes tangled in a paradox. Here's how it might work. Imagine a person travels back in time and accidentally brings a disease with them, maybe something that doesn't exist in the past. The disease spreads and becomes a historical epidemic. Then, in the future, scientists study the disease, but they can't find its original source because it came from a time traveler. The illness has no clear origin. This creates a causal loop. The time traveler got sick in the future. They went back to the past and spread the disease. The disease now exists in history. The future scientists study it, which eventually leads to the traveler's infection. Since the illness has no clear beginning, it's similar to a Bootstrap Paradox, but with a disease instead of an object or knowledge. Another version of the temporal illness paradox could involve a time traveler going to the future for a cure to a deadly disease. They return to the past with the cure, preventing the disease from spreading. But if the disease was cured before it caused any problems, why would the traveler have gone to the future in the first place? The temporal inheritance paradox is a mind-bending scenario that happens when someone inherits something through time travel, leading to a confusing loop where the origin of the inheritance is unclear. Imagine a person named Alex receives a valuable antique watch from their grandfather. But instead of keeping it, Alex uses a time machine to travel back in time and gives the watch to their grandfather when he was young. The grandfather then keeps the watch for years and eventually passes it down to Alex. Now here's the problem. Where did the watch originally come from? Alex got it from their grandfather. The grandfather got it from Alex, who traveled back in time. The watch has no actual creator or point of origin. It simply exists in a loop. This is a type of Bootstrap Paradox, where an object, in this case the watch, has no clear beginning. It's as if the object popped into existence out of nowhere. Schrödinger's time traveler paradox is a thought experiment that combines the weird world of quantum mechanics with the mind-bending ideas of time travel. It's inspired by Schrödinger's cat, a famous concept in physics. First, what's Schrödinger's cat? Imagine a cat inside a sealed box with a device that has a 50-50 chance of releasing poison. Until someone opens the box to check, the cat is considered both alive and dead at the same time, a strange state called superposition. The act of observing the cat forces it to be one or the other. Now, how does this work with time travel? In the Schrödinger's time traveler paradox, a time traveler goes back to a moment where a key event could have two different outcomes, like the flip of a coin. Before they observe the event, both outcomes could exist, just like the cat being both alive and dead. However, once the time traveler sees what happened, they collapse the event into one reality. But if they then return to the future, did their observation change what truly happened, or did both outcomes happen, creating parallel timelines where both versions of the event exist? The paradox. The big question is, Does observing the past change it, or simply confirm what already happened? If the travelers saw one outcome, and then time moved forward, as if that outcome was the only one, it suggests time is fixed. But if their observation caused reality to choose an outcome, it hints that time is flexible, and the act of seeing the past might change it. It's like opening the box to find the cat. Except in this case, the time traveler is deciding what actually happened in history. The temporal lottery paradox is a time travel paradox that happens when someone tries to use time travel to win the lottery, leading to a confusing loop with no clear origin. Imagine a person buys a time machine and travels to the future to check the winning lottery numbers. They write down the numbers, travel back to the past, and buy a ticket with the winning combination. They win the lottery and become rich. But here's the problem. The only reason they knew the winning numbers was because they traveled to the future. But those numbers were only chosen because they won, using them in the past. So, where did the numbers actually come from? Since no one truly predicted the numbers through normal means, they exist in a loop. This is called a Bootstrap Paradox, where something has no origin. The numbers appear out of nowhere, only because time travel made it so. Other complications. Changing the future. What if winning the lottery changes the future so much that the numbers no longer match? The time traveler's knowledge becomes useless, and the paradox unravels. Multiple timelines. Some theories suggest that by using future knowledge, the traveler creates a new timeline where they win the lottery, but the original timeline remains unchanged. Time protecting itself. Some people believe time might prevent paradoxes by stopping the traveler from successfully using the numbers, like the ticket could get lost, or the lottery results could mysteriously change. The temporal lottery paradox is a fun way to think about how using time travel for personal gain might not be as simple as it seems. The temporal afterlife paradox is a fascinating time travel concept that raises questions about life, death, and what happens if time travel interferes with those natural processes. How does it work? Imagine a person is seriously injured and declared dead. But before their death becomes permanent, a time traveler goes back in time and prevents the accident from happening. Now, the person is alive, and the accident never took place. But here's the paradox. If the person never died, why would the time traveler have gone back to save them? And if the time traveler never went back to save them, wouldn't they have died after all? It's a causal loop, a timeline where the cause and effect get tangled. The person's death and survival are both connected, making it impossible to determine which came first. Another version of the paradox. Some versions imagine a scenario where a person dies, and their spirit or afterlife existence begins. But then time is altered to prevent their death, effectively erasing the experience of the afterlife. This creates questions like, did their spirit ever really exist if they never died? Would they remember the experience of dying or the afterlife, even though they are now alive? Possible explanations. Multiple timelines. One timeline exists where the person dies and experiences an afterlife, while another exists where they survive. The two realities may never interact. Memory residue. Some stories explore the idea that people might remember glimpses of their erased deaths, like déjà vu or near-death experiences, self-consistent timeline. In some theories, time corrects itself to prevent paradoxes. The time traveler might fail to prevent the death, or the timeline may shift to ensure no contradictions occur. The temporal afterlife paradox challenges how we think about life, death, and whether time can ever truly be rewritten. The temporal democracy paradox is a thought experiment about what happens when time travel is introduced into a democratic system, like elections or voting. and how it could create logical problems. Imagine a society where time travel exists, and people can send messages or even travel back in time. In this world, an election takes place, and a candidate wins. But what if someone from the future doesn't like the result? A time traveler could go back to influence voters or reveal future consequences of the election to sway opinions. This change might lead to a different candidate winning. But now that a different candidate has won, the original reason for going back in time no longer exists, because the future they were trying to prevent didn't happen. So, would the time travelers still have a reason to go back and change the vote? This creates a causal loop or paradox, where the result of the election keeps shifting, making it impossible to determine a final outcome. Other complications. Voter knowledge paradox. What if future knowledge influences people to vote differently? Knowing a future result may prevent that result from happening, creating a feedback loop. Time traveler bias. People with access to time travel could have an unfair advantage, manipulating outcomes without others knowing. Multiple timelines. Some theories suggest that each interference could split into a new timeline, meaning every possible election result exists somewhere. Possible solutions. Fixed timeline. Time might prevent changes that cause contradictions. No matter how many times a time traveler tries to change the vote, the outcome remains the same. Self-consistent timeline. The time traveler's actions may have already been part of history. They may think they're changing the vote, but their actions were always meant to happen. Multiple realities. Every time the past is changed, a new timeline branches off, and the original timeline still exists with its original election results. The temporal democracy paradox raises fascinating questions about free will, the power of information, and how time travel could disrupt fair decision-making. The temporal species evolution paradox is a time travel concept that involves the evolution of species and what happens when time travel interferes with the natural course of evolution. It creates a paradox where a species' existence becomes tangled in a confusing loop. Imagine a future scientist discovers an extinct animal, like a strange bird that lived millions of years ago. They travel back in time to observe the creature in its natural habitat. While in the past, they accidentally introduce a small change. Perhaps they protect the bird from a predator or prevent a natural disaster that would have affected its survival. Because of this, the bird species thrives, evolves further, and survives all the way to the scientist's present day. But here's the paradox. The bird only survived because the scientist went back in time. But the scientist only went back in time because the bird was thought to be extinct. So, if the bird never went extinct, why would the scientist have gone back in time at all? This creates a causal loop. The bird's existence is both the cause and effect of the time traveler's actions, with no clear starting point. Other versions of the paradox. A time traveler might go back to observe early human ancestors and accidentally introduce knowledge or tools, accelerating human evolution. But if humans advance too quickly, would the future still exist the same way? Someone could bring back a species thought to be extinct, like a dinosaur, and reintroduce it to the past, leading to the species' survival, which erases the reason for the time travel in the first place. Possible solutions. Self-consistent timeline. Some theories suggest time is flexible and self-corrects to prevent contradictions. The bird may still go extinct in a slightly different way, keeping the timeline stable. Time loop acceptance. Similar to other bootstrap paradoxes, the existence of the bird may simply be a result of a stable time loop. It exists because it always did. The temporal species evolution paradox raises fascinating questions about time, fate, and how even small actions can drastically change the natural world. The Novikov self-consistency principle is a concept in time travel theory that tries to solve the problem of paradoxes, those confusing situations where actions in the past could change the future in impossible ways. It was proposed by a Russian physicist named Igor Novikov. His idea is pretty simple but clever. If time travel exists, then events in the past are already consistent with the future. In other words, time travel can happen, but it can't change history in a way that creates contradictions. Let's say someone builds a time machine and goes back in time to stop a famous historical event, like trying to prevent the sinking of the Titanic. According to the Novikov principle, no matter what the time traveler does, something will happen to prevent them from changing the event. Maybe they miss the boat. Maybe their actions accidentally cause the event to happen in a different way. Or maybe their interference was always part of history, meaning their attempt to change the past actually ensured it happened the way it did. It's like time has built-in rules that prevent paradoxes. Time travelers might think they're changing the past, but everything they do ends up being part of the timeline that always existed. Example of the Novikov principle. Imagine a person travels back in time to prevent a fire that destroyed a library. While they're there, they accidentally knock over a lantern, which starts the fire. The very event they were trying to stop only happened because they tried to prevent it. In this case, time remains self-consistent, no paradox. Why is this important? The Novikov principle is one of the main arguments for how time travel could work without creating contradictions like the grandfather paradox, where someone prevents their own existence. It supports the idea that time might act like a self-correcting system. Closed timelike curve. A closed timelike curve, or CTC, is kind of like a magical time loop roller coaster for stuff in space. Imagine you're playing in your backyard, and you find a secret tunnel. You crawl inside, and after a little twist and turn, you pop out in your own backyard again, but 5 minutes earlier. Now there are two of you in the yard, one that just came out of the tunnel from the future, and one that's still about to go in from the present. If you wanted, you could walk into the tunnel again and go back 5 more minutes. You could keep doing this, looping over and over. This tunnel through time is like a closed time-like curve, a special kind of loop that takes you through time and space and brings you back to the same place and time where you started. What's really happening? A closed time-like curve is a path through space and time where something like a person, a spaceship, or even just a particle can travel and end up in its own past. It's a loop in space-time that connects the future back to the past, and it keeps going round and round. Where does this idea come from? This isn't just science fiction. It's actually something that pops out of Einstein's equations in certain strange situations, like near-rotating black holes or wormholes. Scientists aren't sure if these loops can really happen, but they're fun to think about. Many worlds interpretation. Imagine you're playing a video game where every time you make a choice, like picking up a sword or walking past it, the game splits. One version of your character grabs the sword, and another version walks right by. That's the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It says that every time something could happen in more than one way, all the outcomes actually do happen, but in separate universes. So let's say a particle can go left or right. Instead of picking one direction, the universe splits in two. In one world, the particle goes left. In another, it goes right. This doesn't just happen with particles. It could happen with big things too, like your decisions or even whole histories. There's a version of the universe for every possible outcome. all existing at the same time, but in different realities. So every choice, every chance, every coin flip, it all happens, just in different worlds. What is the many worlds interpretation? It's an idea from quantum physics that says every possible outcome actually happens, but in its own universe. Imagine you're playing a game and have to choose open the door or go down the tunnel. In real life, you'd pick one. But in many worlds, the universe splits. In one world, you open the door. In another, you go down the tunnel. Now there are two versions of you in two different universes. Both are real. Why does this idea exist? In quantum physics, particles, tiny things, can do weird stuff, like spin two ways at once. Scientists wondered, what if instead of choosing just one result, the universe lets every result happen? So rather than collapsing into one outcome, the universe just branches into new worlds, like a tree growing new limbs. The many worlds interpretation says that whenever something can happen in more than one way, the universe splits and all the outcomes happen, each in a different world. Quantum entanglement. This one's like magic friendship bracelets for particles. What is quantum entanglement? Imagine you have two teeny tiny particles. You do something special to them so that no matter how far apart they are, on opposite sides of the universe even, they stay linked. If you look at one and it's spinning left, the other instantly spins right, instantly, faster than light. That weird instant connection is entanglement. Now, the paradox. Here's the big wait. What? Moment. We thought nothing could send a message faster than light, Einstein's rule. But with entangled particles, if you check one, the other one instantly knows what happened. That seems like they're talking secretly across space. But how? Are they faster than light? Are they reading each other's minds? Even Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Quantum entanglement paradox is the mystery of how two linked particles seem to share information instantly, even across huge distances, like they're magically connected. The quantum decoherence paradox is very closely related to Schrödinger's paradox, also known as Schrödinger's cat. They're like two sides of the same weird coin. Here's how they connect. Schrödinger's cat is a thought experiment to show how strange quantum superposition is. The cat is both alive and dead until someone opens the box and looks. Quantum decoherence is the scientific explanation for why we don't see that kind of weirdness in real life. It says, when quantum stuff gets tangled up with the big world, like air, light, or even your eyes, the superpositions break down. The cat becomes just alive, or just dead, not both. So, Schrödinger's cat equals why is quantum stuff so weird? And quantum decoherence equals here's how that weirdness disappears when we look. They both deal with the same mystery. Why does the world seem normal if everything is made of weird quantum stuff? Wormholes, also known as Einstein-Rosen bridges, one of the coolest, twistiest ideas in space-time. What is a wormhole? Imagine space and time are like a giant piece of paper. Now fold that paper in half, so two far-apart spots touch. Then poke a tunnel through. Ta-da! That's a wormhole. It's a shortcut through space and time. Instead of traveling around the universe, you go through it. Where does the name come from? Einstein and Rosen came up with the idea in 1935. They used Einstein's general relativity equations to show that black holes might connect to each other through a tunnel. So it's called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, like a bridge between two spots in the universe. Could you travel through one? In theory, yes, But in real life, not yet. They might be super tiny. They might collapse the moment you try to enter. They might need exotic matter, super weird stuff, to stay open. A wormhole, or Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a theoretical tunnel through space and time that could connect distant places or even different times, like a cosmic shortcut. Alcubierre warp drive, a concept that sounds like Star Trek, but comes straight from real physics. What is the Alcubierre warp drive? Imagine you're sitting in a boat. Instead of moving through the water, you move by bending the water around you, pushing it behind and pulling it in front. You just float inside the bubble. The Alcubierre warp drive works the same way, but with space itself. Here's the big idea. You create a bubble of space around your spaceship. Space behind you stretches out, and space in front of you shrinks. Your ship doesn't move through space. Space moves around you. This could, in theory, let you travel faster than light without breaking the speed limit, because your ship itself isn't moving in space. Space is doing the moving. This could, in theory, let you travel faster than light without breaking the speed limit, because your ship itself isn't moving in space. Space is doing the moving. Who came up with this? Mexican physicist Miguel Alcubierre in 1994, using Einstein's equations of general relativity. So can we build one? Not yet. And maybe never. It would need exotic matter with negative energy. We don't even know if that kind of matter exists. And the energy needed, more than the whole universe might have. The Alcubierre warp drive is a theoretical spaceship that rides a wave of warped space, allowing faster-than-light travel without actually speeding through space. Tachyonic Antitelephone. What is a tachyonic antitelephone? First, let's meet the tachyon. A tachyon is a theoretical particle that always moves faster than light. Scientists have never found one, but in math, they can exist. Now imagine using these tachyons to send a message through space. Here's where it gets mind-bendy. If a signal goes faster than light, then in some situations, it could arrive before it was sent. That means you could call the past. A tachyonic antitelephone is a device that uses tachyons to send a message back in time. Why is this a paradox? Because it messes with cause and effect. Let's say you send a message to yourself in the past. That message tells you not to send it, so you don't send it. But then, how did past you get the message in the first place? This is a time travel paradox, just like the grandfather paradox, where doing something in the past cancels out the reason you did it. The tachyonic antitelephone is a thought experiment about using faster-than-light particles to send messages into the past, which creates confusing time travel paradoxes. Cosmic strings. What are cosmic strings? Imagine the early universe, hot, dense, and chaotic, like a giant boiling soup. As it cooled, it might have formed cracks or lines in space, like cracks in ice forming on a frozen pond. These cracks are called cosmic strings. They're super thin, like thinner than an atom thin. But they're crazy dense. A single inch could weigh as much as a mountain. Think of them as infinitely long threads of energy, left over from the Big Bang. What makes them special? Cosmic strings could bend space and time around them, just like black holes. Might act like gravity wires, pulling things toward them. Could even create closed time loops, like in time travel theories. So why are they a big deal? If cosmic strings exist, they could help explain the shape and structure of the universe. Show us clues about the earliest moments after the Big Bang. Maybe even allow for space travel shortcuts or time travel puzzles. But scientists haven't found any yet, so there's still just a theoretical idea. Cosmic strings are super thin, ultra-dense lines of energy that might be ancient leftovers from the early universe and could bend space and time in wild ways. Gödel universe. In 1949, Kurt Gödel, a brilliant mathematician and buddy of Einstein, imagined a universe based on Einstein's relativity equations, but with a wild twist. This universe rotates, the whole thing spins like a giant cosmic carousel. And here's the mind-blower. In Gödel's spinning universe, time doesn't behave normally. Thanks to the twisty shape of space-time, it's possible to take a journey through space and end up in your own past. That means time loops are allowed. You could travel in a circle and come back before you left. It creates closed time-like curves, just like a time loop track. Why is it a paradox? Because it leads to time travel puzzles like, what if you go back and stop yourself from traveling? Can you change the past? Or does the loop lock everything in? Plus, our universe doesn't seem to be rotating like Gödel imagined. But his math does work, which keeps scientists scratching their heads. The Gödel universe theory is a spinning universe idea where time loops are possible, meaning you could, in theory, travel back and visit your own past. Kerr black hole theory. Let's dive into the twisty, spinny world of the Kerr black hole theory, where black holes don't just pull things in, they whirl like cosmic tornadoes. First, what's a black hole? A black hole is a spot in space where gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape. It usually forms when a giant star collapses in on itself. But a Kerr black hole? It's not your ordinary black hole. It's got spin. What makes a Kerr black hole special? Discovered by Roy Kerr in 1963, the Kerr black hole theory describes black holes that rotate. Here's what happens when a black hole spins. It drags space and time around with it, like a cosmic whirlpool. It creates a region called the ergosphere, where space itself is moving. Inside, there's still the usual event horizon, the point of no return. But here's the twist. Some theories say that spinning black holes could allow for exotic paths through space-time, like wormholes, or even time travel loops, closed time-like curves. Why is this a big deal? Because if Kerr black holes really work the way the math says they might, they could connect different parts of space or different times. They might be the universe's natural time machines. Of course, this is all still theoretical. We haven't jumped into one yet. So to sum it up, a Kerr black hole is a spinning black hole that might twist space and time enough to allow for wormholes or even time travel. Traversable wormhole theory, a cosmic shortcut that in theory you could actually walk, fly, or zoom through. What's a wormhole? Quick recap. A wormhole is like a tunnel connecting two far-apart places in space or time, like folding a piece of paper and poking a hole through it. Poof! Instant shortcut across the universe. But most wormholes, like those from black holes, are super unstable. They'd collapse if anything tried to go through. Enter traversable wormhole theory. Can we build or find a wormhole that stays open long enough for a person or spaceship to travel through? A traversable wormhole is one that doesn't collapse when you enter it, can be used for travel across space or even time, and doesn't squash you like a pancake inside. How could it work? To hold it open, you might need something called exotic matter, weird stuff, with negative energy that pushes outward instead of pulling in. This exotic matter would act like scaffolding, keeping the tunnel from snapping shut. In short, A traversable wormhole is a theoretical tunnel through space-time that could safely let people or ships pass through, like a cosmic bridge across the universe or time.